Good evening, everybody, on this Sunday evening.
Possible GTA suspect there now, 4730 Crystal Springs Drive, in the parking lot above the merry-go-round. 2 males, no further description, adding striping to a black Cadillac four-door.
We hope you're having a great Sunday. Man, have we got a show for you. I can't believe I got my buddy back, Jeff Wood, and we have an amazing program lined up for you this evening. So grab your popcorn, get near your seatbelt, strap in. We're going to go for a ride, so take a seat. They're playing my song here. Welcome to our mods. Teresa M, Maui Girl, Mimi J2, Miss Sophia, and Laura Waddy. Without you, we can't do this. So grateful. Hello, Teddy's mom, Lori, Ruby Slippers, popcorn ready. I love it. Put your seatbelts on.
415, 1 Lincoln Zebra John 415. Northbound Grammar State, 5 to 10 minutes ago. 2 male Caucasians, 20 to 25 years. Both had guns. Number 1 wearing white pants and a black shirt. Incident 329, Wilshire Unit handling identified. 2845, possible code Tom, 8 in Alvarado. 2879 inwards with a 2-minute ETA.
Welcome, everybody. And I'm telling you, we are in for a great conversation with Jeff Wood. Let me introduce Jeff if you're new here in terms of not knowing who he is. Jeff Wood not only is a friend and a colleague at the Cold Case Foundation, but he is an expert in criminal gangs and transnational gangs, i.e., from around the world. And tonight we're going to talk about a whole bunch of things. But Jeff was an FBI special agent for over 20 plus years, and he's conducted some of the most complex criminal gang operations targeting violent street gangs, including MS-13. When he was assigned to the office as an agent, he was assigned out of Boston, Washington, D.C., but it gets better than that. He was one of the investigators during the Boston Marathon bombing in terms of, interviewing folks. And he had the guy, remember the guy in the Mercedes that was the suspects went after? And Jeff had a lot of conversation with that gentleman who actually he ID'd him, right, Jeff?
He did. He was carjacked, and he was able to get away and call 911 and get the police chasing them, and it led to the firefight in Watertown, Massachusetts later that night.
Yeah, so, and if you've never met Jeff, we've done a couple of shows with him, so he's in the under FBI stories. And anyway, he was, on top of that, Jeff is a military veteran. He was a U.S. Army airborne ranger, and he served as a platoon leader, a sniper scout platoon leader, and he would also work for the State Department, where he worked on diplomatic protection aid group, right? Or
Service, yes.
Yeah, that's what you guys did, right? I mean, and you've been all around the world. So we've got some great stories we're going to hear tonight. I just know Jeff. Every time I talk to him, my jaw goes down to the floor again. It's like, dude, why didn't you share that with me before? I'm teasing. But tonight we want to focus on a couple of things. There's a lot going on in this country today where, the U.S. borders open, there are gangs, flowing into the country. There are, human trafficking, there's fentanyl, drugs, narcotics, etc. Well, gangs, Jeff's been around and he's been on the front line as well as, behind the scenes, working in undercover capacities. So I thought it would be a good idea, to talk about, some of these Venezuelan groups, but also, pick his brain a little bit about, why China's coming across the border, or at least they were, as well as MS-13, and how did this whole thing happen? So, Jeff, welcome again to tonight's program. We're so excited to have you here, brother.
Always love to come and talk with you, Chris. It's great. Love listening to your old stories too.
And also, he is still teaches at Boston College, and he's an expert in the subject matter that we're going to talk about this evening. So, get your questions ready over there in the chat. If he catches something and he wants to answer it, he'll grab it, and so we've got a wealth of information here in front of you. So let's talk about the elephant sitting there on the couch, and that's fentanyl. Okay. And fentanyl trafficking into our country has become very violent, and it seems like the cartels and the Chinese have been behind that. Last year, we had an estimated 80 to 100,000 people killed, and we have a national opioid crisis where at least one individual every 11 minutes is passing away because of the opioid crisis. It's flooding across our southern border, along with children. And you gave some statistics about children before we went on air here, Jeff. Share with the audience real fast, if you have them still in front of you, in relationship to the amount of kids in 2020 that had come across the border that were grabbed.
Well, Chris, let me start off by saying I've been tracking the numbers of unaccompanied minors crossing the border since 2014.
Okay.
Because I was conducting MS-13 investigation back then, and they were being recruited, or a lot of the unaccompanied minors were already affiliated with MS-13 who were crossing the border. So typically between 2014 and 2020, we had seen anywhere from 33,000 up to almost 70,000 kids crossing the border per year. In 2020, it dropped to a little over 15,000. But in 2021, we had a 697% increase, almost a 700% increase. We went from 15,000 unaccompanied minors, we just call them UACs, to 122,000. And it stayed above 120,000 almost ever since. 2023, it was down to about 118,900. But last year, the numbers were very similar, if not more. So I haven't seen the numbers because they're still compiling them. When you go online, you can find them. But I imagine that they were, again, over 120,000 UACs crossing the border.
So that would be part of the group where the government has been saying, hey, we're not sure where these minors are, right, at the time? Or, go ahead.
So, yes, that's what we've been seeing in the news, that they've lost a lot of unaccompanied minors. The problem is, even those that they know, I saw this constantly when I was doing my MS-13 investigation. my partner and I, our partners and I, we're doing these investigations, and you'd have these UACs cross the border. They hadn't seen their sponsor. Their sponsor would be a father, a mother, an uncle, a grandmother, right? But somebody's sending them across the border to link up with their sponsor, but they haven't seen them for years. They don't know them. There's already a family in place. And a lot of these kids, as I said, were already associated with MS-13. A majority were not, but now they're being recruited. But those who are associated with the gang, as soon as they get to the house, within weeks they've left and they're living with MS-13 gang members in what we call destroyer houses. That's what they call them, destroyer houses, and that's their home base. And you could hit a house that was a destroyer house and find 8 to 12 MS-13 gang members all living there, doing gang typical stuff, right? So imagine now how many are affiliated with gangs. And it's not just MS-13, it's 18th Street. And now also TDA, because TDA, the Tren de Aragua, the Venezuelan street gang that's been in the press a lot, they first started coming across the border. And well, we knew by at least the spring of 2023 that they were here, but I would say they probably were coming in before that. You know, it's like every kind of gang or any kind of criminal enterprise or element that crosses the border. Typically, it takes them a while to get known, to become for law enforcement to become aware of them. So if we've known and identified them as having a presence here in the States in the spring of 2023, they were here in 2022, 2021. So wow. And now I think we've got up to between 3,000 to 5,000 TDA members here operating in the country.
Wow. Okay. And so we're going to really dig into this, guys and gals. I mean, as you can tell already, I'm already glued to my seat with my seatbelt already strapped in. But let's tackle fentanyl conversation here for a minute, okay? I mean, it's flooding across our border. I mean, the penalties and the precursor suppliers, they're being shipped in, through China, through the cartels. But what do you make of that? How do we make sense of that?
Fentanyl started actually coming across the border probably around 2015 to 2016. And okay. It comes in both to Mexico and China, or Canada, I mean. So China, it's anesthesiologists use fentanyl to put surgery patients to sleep, but it's a synthetic opioid, and the Chinese make it and they ship it to the cartels in Mexico and to Canada, and in it comes. And the Canadians create fake oxy pills. It's very cheap. A kilo of fentanyl is probably going to be around, or was in 2017 when I met with the Canadian Mounties and we had a long day of just discussing fentanyl. You're talking about $12,000 for a key of fentanyl. You buy a pill press, that's $6,000. So now you've spent $18,000, and you can make 1 million pills of fake Oxycontin. You're selling each pill from $20 to $40. So for $18,000, it's a pretty good turnaround.
Tell that story of when you guys took down some of those chemicals, and you were just telling it in the lab, put the hold on you.
Oh yeah. So with fentanyl, again, it's a quicker high, a better high compared to heroin. So when I first started working gangs, and we would buy heroin, if you bought a gram of heroin, it would be $100. So $1,000 for 10 grams. And then in 2016 timeframe, while we're working cases, we're buying heroin. We saw the price drop down to $250 on average for 100 grams. So I mean, huge difference. But we were being told it was more pure, and I just kind of seemed odd that you were getting it so cheap, and we were just finding out about it. So we bought some from our source. We bought 10 grams, and we're testing it. And the test kit kept showing that it was nothing. It was fake. And when we bought it, we were told this is 100% pure heroin. It had never been stepped on. It is pure. So we're sitting there going, after 3 tests with our test kits, we're just saying this is baloney. This is crap. This isn't heroin. And we're getting ready to direct the source to call the supplier back and say, what did you sell me? This is junk, right? And one of our partners called the state lab saying, hey, what's going on here? We're not getting anything. And they immediately put the kibosh. They're like screaming on the phone, back it up, seal it. Because, if you spilled it, you'd all OD, because they knew right away, because they were already doing a lot of testing and seeing. And you had a lot of instances where before we realized what was happening, you had a I can't remember if it was a state lab or a DEA lab, but someone was testing it and it spilled and it poofed, and person OD'd trying to do his or her job. You had a SWAT team, I think it was in Connecticut. They flash banged the house to go as they were going in, and all the fentanyl went in the air. And before the whole SWAT team went down, and they had to get rescued. And I mean, none died. They were able to save them, but
and they weren't thinking Narcan back then when it first started hitting the streets.
This was all brand new, and we actually had in Lawrence, Massachusetts, some of our gang targets. They all OD'd. They were packaging fentanyl, but they were snorting cocaine, and they actually snorted the fentanyl instead of the cocaine. So
my goodness,
were dead. So I mean, this was what was happening, because it was so new. And you had heroin addicts who, if they got heroin, they would get so angry and complain because they were already starting to get a heroin and fentanyl mix. And when they would shoot it up, they're like, I'm not getting the high that I want because it's not fentanyl. And so then it got from a heroin fentanyl mix to a mostly pure fentanyl, because they you're always chasing the dragon. You always want the initial high, and you never get the initial high again, right?
Right. Explain to everybody what I know what you mean by chasing the dragon, but for our audience, how they're smoking it off of the. Go ahead.
Right. It's when you get high, you get that first high, you're constantly wanting that high, and they call it chasing the dragon, because you can't get that same high. It's the first time you've ever had it. So it's never as good. So now you start increasing the dosage. You want it more pure than you had it. So that way you're chasing that high, whether you're shooting it or smoking it or snorting it. And it's just, that's how it happens. Right. And that's why you see so many people. I mean, in Massachusetts, we used to see people would walk into the bathrooms of the emergency room, tie their hands to the cord to say, hey, there's an emergency in this bathroom, and shoot up, OD, boom, they'd alert the nurses that there was some emergency in that bathroom so they could get the Narcan and be brought back to life.
Holy cow.
So, I mean, that, and that all started in the 2016, 2017 timeframe, and it's just gotten worse.
Wow. And so let's if you're just joining us, Jeff Wood here, he actually ran one of the biggest operations taking down MS-13 on the East Coast. And how many guys did you guys end up hooking up in that operation? Like,
we indicted, I think, because I actually, as a retired agent, I was called back into the grand jury. We indicted 2 more people, so I think we're up to about 64 people we indicted. We have a few. We were the first time ever we indicted an MS-13 leader. I mean, senior leader in the program down in El Salvador, who had not stepped foot once in the United States during the investigation. We indicted him out of El Salvador. We'll never get him because we don't have any kind of treaty to extradite. And it was a shame, because back in 2019, 2020, we created Task Force Vulcan, where there was probably 10 of us around the country who all worked MS-13, and they brought us together to target MS-13 leadership in El Salvador and Mexico. And my partner and I, we indicted a major leader in Mexico, got him arrested. The Mexicans brought him right to the border, gave him to us, and it was the first time we'd ever also not only used the RICO charges, we actually used counterterrorism charges against him, and for the indictment. So we were we were in the process of getting some extradition out of El Salvador, but in 2021, President Biden shut down our ability to actually extradite anyone out of El Salvador. So Task Force Falcon kind of went away, which was unfortunate because we had done some really good work targeting the main leaders throughout the Central America.
Well, yeah, and there's been a transition. Let's talk about a high level overview. Give our audience a high level overview of the hierarchy in relation. I mean, these aren't just gang members. They're almost paramilitary organizations. I mean, just can you kind of break down? Let's do MS-13 because I'm assuming this gang from TDA from Tren de Aragua from Venezuela is going to have pretty much have the similar command structure. Would I be off base on that?
I think they'd be probably even more sophisticated than MS-13.
Okay.
So when you look at TDA, I call it TDA because I butcher the English language, let alone the Spanish language. So Tren de Aragua, TDA, Venezuelan gang, they have connections to the government where they're working with the president. So when you look at them, he wants a very well-trained criminal enterprise, and he has exported TDA. He's specifically directed TDA to go out to other countries to commit criminal activities and be their a mercenary type group to commit criminal activities to gain money and do things on behalf of the president. So I'd say they're probably a little bit more. Unfortunately, not being out, I can talk to generalizations about TDA, just being a gang expert,
Right.
knowing gangs, but I wouldn't know specifically, the full breakdown per se, as I would MS-13. But MS-13, they had the command for the entire gang. All 13 were locked up in jail. So you had the leader, who we called El Diablo. He was the devil and his disciples. And so the 13 of them ran MS-13. And in order to create a good structure, they created what they call the program. So here you have the leadership, La Rampa, with El Diablo and his disciples running everything. And then they had all these programs. And so for example, the program that I dealt with the most was the East Coast program. So it was MS-13 cliques all operating in the eastern seaboard of the United States. But you'd have them go out as we had East Coast program MS-13 members in Texas, in Arizona. So you'd have I did the East Coast, but you had the New York program, you had the Hollywood program because they were so big. Hollywood, where the gang was founded, it was just so big they call it the Hollywood program. And then so you had Hollywood program, East Coast program, New York program leaders in El Salvador giving directions to the East Coast program leader in the United States, the New York program leader in the States. And then they would give it down to their reps to wherever they were. So you'd have 3 East Coast program leaders in Massachusetts reporting to the East Coast program leader who was based in Richmond, Virginia. And it would that happened throughout the whole country where there was East Coast program members. So you have those leaders. And then you have cliques, individual cliques. And so in Massachusetts, you had the Everett Loco Salvatrucha. You had the Somerville clique that they called TLS. You had East Boston clique. So you had all these cliques. We had about 8 or 9 cliques operating.
And what's a clique? What's a clique?
A clique would be
for the audience.
The clique is each gang has a name for the city or the chapter they belong in. So, easy example would be the Hells Angels. They have the Salem chapter out of Salem, Mass. So everyone in that part of Massachusetts would be affiliated with the Salem chapter. So the cliques, you'd have East Boston, and that would be a clique. So all East Boston MS-13 members are running with East Boston.
But these aren't like individual, like,
They're individual
the
little.
mafia, but they're not individual like families. These are all one family in different neighborhoods.
Yes.
Okay.
And you could have someone who who initially joined East Boston, they could move and live in another city, but they would still rep East Boston clique, that chapter, that family, whatever you want to say, and they would come in to do their meetings. So, for example, our source in our MS-13 case, he was a member of the East Side Local Salvatrucha clique. And so even though they were predominantly kind of founded in the Chelsea area, they, one of their big meeting spots was in Malden, Massachusetts, and they would just drive to this garage because they had somebody who was working in this garage. They stayed in the garage, so when the owner of the garage would leave at night, they would have their gang meetings in the garage in Malden, Massachusetts. So our source would wear a camera wire into the garage and record their meetings. So, and each clique would have a first word, they called it first word, or El Parabra, and the second word. And those were the two basic leaders of the clique. So if something needed to be discussed, we'd have a meeting. Chris, you're the first word. And I'd say, Chris, Billy Bob just broke this rule. I want him punished. And we'd have a little mini trial. And if you found, and the rest of the gang found that, yes, Billy Bob had broken a rule, you would issue the punishment, which would be we get to beat him up for 13 seconds. And he couldn't defend himself, right? We get to assault him for 13 seconds. So I don't know. I doubt TDA breaks it down quite the same. But what I gathered and what I've seen, and so I know this does happen, when MS-13, they're in Central American communities. So where you have a large El Salvadorian, Guatemalan, Honduras population, you'll have MS-13, right? So TDA being Venezuelan, when they cross the border, they would go and find Venezuelan populations, communities within the United States. And they're in Montana, they're in New York, they're in Texas, they're in Colorado, and they're in other states. And Tennessee, I think we've identified maybe 13 plus states that there's Venezuelan populations. But even if we haven't seen TDA in a Venezuelan population yet where they've come out, if you have a Venezuelan population, you have TDA. It's the same thing with MS-13. People say, we don't have MS-13 here. Do you have a large Central American population here? Yes, then you have them there. They just haven't done something yet that's come out. So TDA, again, started in 2023 here, but we really didn't start seeing much until about 2024, maybe later 2023, because we did see some fights with TDA.
So this is a new phenomenon, obviously, TDA being here in the U.S.
I would say they've really been here since probably 2021, 2022.
So within the last 4 or 5 years.
Yes.
Okay. And so let's break that down a little bit here. So I want to, one of the things that, there's controversy right now around the country, believe it or not. I don't know the totality of what people may or may not know in relationship to how dangerous these guys are. And I want to show a clip that you brought here about a guy getting kicked out of a bar. Okay. Yeah. And walk us through this clip here, but and then explain what we're seeing here. So let me go ahead.
So we'll talk more about just gang stuff in a little bit, but one of the things I mentioned is that gangs control their turf, their territory, by creating an atmosphere of fear. So here we have an MS-13 gang member. He's just getting kicked out of the bar, and he's not happy. And this is a street camera, so there's no audio. It's just completely video. But you'll see him talking to somebody, and that's where he's actually telling his friend, distract the bouncer that's kicking me out. And he kind of walks.
I'm trying to get this thing to play. Hang on, Jeff. I may have to pull it out and re-upload it here. Give me 30 seconds.
Okay.
But go ahead. explaining what we're going to see here in a second.
MS-13 gang members would wear pants, and they would take a machete and they put a little loop inside their pant that they would hook the machete up to, and then they would have the machetes inside their pants. So as they're walking around, they're already carrying a machete, and this guy pulls out a machete and attacks the bouncer for kicking him out of the bar. Atmosphere of fear. This is what they do.
Okay, I'm trying to get this thing to work for me. Hang on. Sorry, I don't know what just happened. It's playing, but it's not playing, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
All right, I'll get it to go here in a second, but I may have to download it again. I apologize.
You don't see the action of just. I saw a couple comments. You see him swing, but you don't see him hit the guy.
Yeah.
You know what happened? The guy did get hit. He almost lost his hand, but you don't see that on the video because the guy's falling back into the bar, so it's outside of the view of the
Okay, so we'll come to that, back to that. Let me go over here to this one then of the folks in Colorado. And let's talk about, while I'm setting this up here, and I'll get the other video again. Human trafficking, drug trafficking, the cartels are big time into this, right? And these gangs.
Gangs and cartels huge into human trafficking.
Yeah, I mean, it's a billion-dollar industry, and they bring people across from the border, the southern border, and they're coming from all over the world. And you made an interesting comment about this Venezuelan gang, that the president may have, from Venezuela, may have sent them. What was your thought on that?
Oh no, he helped create this gang. So, I mean, you've got members that are former Venezuelan military. You have members who are big criminals, and he has exported this gang. They work for him. This isn't just. They are basically a mercenary. They're a gang, but they're mercenaries.
So basically, they are the support mechanism to maintain control, even for them down there in Venezuela.
Oh yes, they've gone into different countries like Chile. They'll kidnap people, and the way the money comes, they'll go to get the person back. They'll be receiving the money here in the States, and they'll send it back to Venezuela.
Well, so let me play this real fast.
ICE and the DEA raided a makeshift nightclub early this morning in Adams County that they say is run by members of the Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua. A total of 49 people were inside, and immigration officials say 41 were in the country illegally. Authorities seized drugs, weapons, and cash. Fox 31's Kasha Karich joins us live from the DEA's office in Centennial with the very latest on this investigation. Kasha?
Kim, the DEA told me this months-long investigation into this Venezuelan gang TDA started during the Biden administration and carried over into Trump's. But despite this administration change, this operation was just normal business for the DEA.
I feel like the people in Denver metro area can wake up today and feel like they have a safer city to live in.
Dozens of people in handcuffs, surrounded by law enforcement in this morning's snowy conditions at a makeshift nightclub near Federal and 65th.
This nightclub only sets up on certain weekends, and it's invitation only to members of TDA and their associates. So they send out invite across social media.
The DEA says about 50 people who were in the country illegally were taken into custody, many connected to TDA.
We took people who were selling drugs. There was potential prostitution at the location. There was guns at the location. We know they're involved in much higher level drug trafficking, and a lot of them went to jail today.
DEA is reporting TDA activity across the Denver metro area.
In the beginning, I think a lot of the focus was on the folks in Aurora, especially after the videos that came out on the internet. They've moved around other places to kind of take some of the heat off themselves.
Hang on. Okay, so I want to pull that off here for a second. Let's talk about why those kids, like you mentioned there earlier, who have been evaporated in this country, and this is a really important piece of this puzzle for folks here in the United States, that when they start saying we're going to go after the worst of the worst and get rid of them, help the audience understand how they utilize kids into these types of environments.
So I will say, not every kid that comes into the country is a gang member, right? So you can't say 100% are gang members. I would say the majority are not. But you know, for MS-13, and it'll be very similar to TDA, but I can speak more to MS-13 because I saw it and I studied it. But I would say, you know, let's say 70% of the kids across the border are normal kids. Then you're going to have 20 to 25% that are associated with the gang. They're not full-blown MS-13 gang members. They're not going to be full-blown TDA gang members, but they're associated. They've been recruited. They're starting to break the law. They're starting to do things. And then you're going to have that last 5 to 10% that are full-blown gang members. So for MS-13, that means you've killed a minimum of 5 people. So you could have a 15-year-old, because they recruit MS-13 in El Salvador as young as 11. So by 15, you're a homeboy. You've killed 5 people at a minimum. Probably you've been involved in more than 5 murders at 15. And, you know, now today, under the FBI's definition of a serial killer, it's 2 or more people. We're letting 15-year-old serial killers into this country. Here's the video we were talking about. Oh, you got it working.
Yep. Okay. So yeah, keep talking, because this is how dangerous these guys are.
Right. So this is an MS-13 gang member, and you know, so now, you know, he's getting this guy distracted. There's the bouncer, kind of flips him off. Right there, he's starting to take the machete out of his pants, and he comes in and he attacks the bouncer and almost takes his hand off.
He took a swing at him.
Yes.
And what was the reason he took a swing at him?
Because he felt disrespected. He got kicked out of the bar. The bouncer didn't let him in. And that's the atmosphere of fear. So imagine you're on this trip to the United States. You're coming to the States. You've got all these kids who are innocent, leaving El Salvador, leaving Venezuela, leaving Honduras, leaving Guatemala, and you've already got known associates becoming gang members and gang members. Those gang members are directing the associates, find out everything you can about the kids. So when they get here, they get to their sponsors. They're now in Boston. They're in Colorado, Montana, wherever they're staying. You'll have those gang members who know. Now they're directing all the kids who are the associates, start recruiting the new kids. So they're going to the high schools and they're being recruited. The new kids are being recruited. And if they don't come in, they get threatened. They're saying, if you do not do what we tell you to do, we're going to go back because we know you have family, because we found out, we've done our research. The entire trek here, however they get here, oh, where's your parents live? Where's your family from? So they find all this out, and they'll go and they'll say, we'll kill them if you don't join the gang. So now they're being forced to join the gang. Plus, when initially, the reason why they can get a stronghold here in the States is when they're in their communities, they start preying on in their community. So you're coming from Venezuela, El Salvador. There's not a lot of trust between the government, the police, and the community, right? So, one, there's a lack of trust to report any crimes to law enforcement here. 2, maybe I'm here illegally, so I'm afraid of coming forward and tell the truth or tell anything that's going on. And 3, if I do come forward, they're going to go kill my family in my host country, wherever I'm from. So why will I? What could Boston PD? What could whatever town PD do to save me when my family in Venezuela or Colorado, or I mean not Colorado, El Salvador, right? There's nothing there for them. They're like, I report this, right? And it starts off small. They start extorting people.
And this is real. This is reality. We're watching this reality, and you sent me the photographs. I'm not going to put them up of this guy but he did get hit in the arm.
Oh
right?
yeah,
pretty bad.
There was a case where we had a 15 and 16-year-old who were 18th Street gang members. MS-13 does this, right? They go out and they go patrol. So they're like, hey, we're in this neighborhood. This is our territory. Let's go look for people to go kill. Literally 18th Street gang members. They go out looking to kill them. So there's, again, another street camera like this. I couldn't find it. I have it. And I'll send it to you later when I do find it. But you have these 2 kids you see walking up the street. Then you see 2 kids on the opposite side of the street coming down. And you see the 2 kids, they on this side, they recognize them. They duck behind a car, immediately cross the street, and you see them attacking. And then one kid, he got stabbed right here. And you can see him when he's running away. He's like holding the side. He died 3 times on the operating table. They had to open him up from like up here all the way down to below his belly button to get in there and save him. And it was so unique because in our trial, we bring the surgeon in to testify about this in one of our RICO trials. And when he first looked at the pictures, he goes, hot damn. Or no, I'm sorry. He goes, oh yeah, I remember this case. The guy died. And we're like, no, you saved him. He goes, hot damn, I'm good. And he got on the stand but he testified to how he saved him. But that kid a year later was murdered because they found him again and killed him. And they stabbed him 50 some times, shot him to finish him off. And they were trying to chop his head off. And the guy who shot him got punished because he shot him too early because they didn't chop his head off and roll his head. Because the goal, I had the murderer on tape saying, hey, we wanted to get his head and roll it down the street like we do in El Salvador. But the guy shot him too early and we had to split before we could do that.
Okay. So I think, I mean, that stuff is just horrific on the streets in America. There is absolutely, and I've been around a couple of weekends and have seen a lot of stuff. But in the last 10 years, I'll just say 10 years, this is like high-end violence like this country has never seen on the streets of the United States.
Chris, I can say the reason why is this.
And please.
We look at these gangs and compare them to our nationally known street gangs, the Bloods, the Crips, the Kings, the GDs, right? We look at those gangs and yes, they're violent. Yes, they shoot each other, but they're not as violent. When MS-13 was first founded, they weren't quite as violent because they were founded here in the States. After gang members got...
And tell everybody about that in 18th Street in LA.
All right, so in 1979, 18th Street, MS-13 formed by El Salvadorian immigrants fleeing the Civil War in El Salvador. Initially, MS-13 was more just like kind of stoners lifting the heavy metals, but they converted to a typical American street gang, and they did typical American street gang type violence against each other. And MS-13 and 18th Street gang members started getting arrested. And even though they fled the Civil War and were here legally, but once they're convicted of a felony, if they're not a U.S. citizen yet, that's automatic deportation. You're a felon. We're not going to give you the ability to become a U.S. citizen. So all these gang members went back to El Salvador. And this is where I tie it to TDA. These countries that we're used to aren't U.S., right? They're back in their country where they've been under civil war. Venezuela, where you've got this president who just removes people he wants to remove because they disagree with him. The violence is at a level that Americans are not used to. Where you go to El Salvador during the war, you'd wake up in the morning and, hey, there was a bomb strike, and you'd see dead bodies everywhere. I mean, could you imagine walking around New York City and seeing dead bodies every single day, many of them all over the streets, right? You know, I'm not saying there isn't violence, and people haven't seen some of that violence when things happen, but this is a daily occurrence. So that mindset is a totally different mindset, and they have a totally different belief. So when now they're importing now the gang has gone from an American gang to an El Salvadorian gang, third world nation, war-torn nation, civil war nation. Venezuela, third world nation. Violence is a different mentality. They don't have the same kind of beliefs that we have. Now they're here. And once they start doing more violence, where it's not just a simple extortion, small petty stuff that's staying on the radar, when MS-13 starts killing people, when TDA starts targeting Americans, which we've seen, they're going into the apartment complexes. Now you're starting to see all this. Now they take their violence. They don't care that they're no longer in Venezuela. They don't care that they're in El Salvador. They're doing the same violence here that they did there. They don't care. And the problem is, because I saw it, I did get to testify because I wasn't high enough in the FBI, which I think is a mistake. They only let real senior people testify in front of Congress or the Senate. But I was sitting in a Senate intelligence meeting, and they're talking to these police officers, and they go, you know, all the officers were asked by one of the senators about community policing. And you and I know, Chris, you know, community policing is, if done right, is very important.
Yeah.
Right. But they don't realize here, and some of the senior law enforcement officers, because they don't know it and they don't investigate it like some of us have. They're like, oh yeah, community policing is a great idea. Yeah, we should do this more with MS-13. No, because that's sign. If an MS-13 gang member, if a TDA gang member is seen talking to a police officer, and it could be just you, Chris, rolling up and saying, "Who is this guy?" Because we all do FIOs, right? Remember, you jump out of the car and talk to somebody, just find out who they are. That will sign their death warrant. I got called one night. Our team, not me personally, but the team I was working with, we got called one night saying, "Hey," a source said, "We got 2 gang members in this park right now near it's in East Boston. It's near the airport. Everyone knows this park. There's like several MS-13 gang members. 2 of them are armed." So we immediately show up. There's 3 off to one side. There's a couple others, but we talk to all of them. We find the 2 with the gun, or the 2 with guns. We arrest them, lock them up. The kid who was standing with them was killed a few months later because they're like, he ratted out those 2 guys. Never even, wasn't our source, had nothing to do with tipping us off, but in their mind, that's it. We had another guy where he was driving the car, his passenger had the gun. Our source told us, we have the car pull over. They see the guy in the passenger seat, immediately does the, let me put something under my seat. So they find the gun. We knew the gun was there, but we used his affirmative movement to find the gun. We get him arrested. But if you remember in a police report, what happens? The driver was Jeff Wood. Chris McDonald was the passenger. We arrested Chris McDonald for being in possession of an illegal firearm, right? And next thing you know, they're trying to kill Jeff Wood because there's no way we would have ever found the gun on Chris if it hadn't been for Jeff Wood telling him. And that was enough. I mean, I was lucky enough. We got the word that they were trying to kill me, or this kid. His name was his street name was Clacker, but we were able to go and convince his father that they were going to kill him because the kid wasn't listening to us, and his father bid on it. But they actually sent a hitman in to kill that kid, and we were able to save his life.
Yeah, I think you tapped into something that really is just starting to get a national conversation. I mean, you've been in the trenches for many years, and you saw it coming. In fact, that's why you teach at Boston College. I mean, you just haven't fallen off a turnip truck and showed up one day and say, "Hey, I'm Jeff Wood, expert in gangs." I mean, you've been behind the scenes in a lot of different stuff, and we'll talk about some of that you can talk about. But just recently, the new president, just designated a transnational criminal organization such as TNA as basically the criminal organization that has unled its terror throughout South and Central America, specifically in Colombia, Chile, Ecuador, and Peru. And he just said that, no, these are, basically terrorist organizations. And one of the things that I think moved the administration towards that is they were planting IEDs near the border to counter movements. And, they're also starting to connect, convoys. There was a recent Border Patrol shootout. There was a situation in San Diego and Jacumba where a hiker ran across some of these guys on a trail. They end up executing him. So the president has recently designated them as terrorist organizations. Do you think that will have an impact in your experience?
I think it will, as long as we follow through. I mean, if you think about it, has the war on terror ever been declared over?
No.
I don't think it has. So, I mean, I think that enables us to maybe, it has to be careful because again, you don't want to cause a war per se, but if you remember under President Bush, the second one, he declared the war on terror, and he said either you're with us or against us, and we're coming after terrorists, right? So, I mean, if Mexico doesn't want to work with us, I mean, it technically it could give us the ability to say, "Hey, we know where you are. We'll drop a bomb on that group." Right? I mean, you just saw President Trump go after some more ISIS leaders in Somalia. So I do think that yes, it will enable us to use many different laws here to go after cartel members, TDA, El Salvador. As I said, when I was on Task Force Falcon, one of the first targets that we went after, we indicted not only on RICO type charges, but we did use some counterterrorism laws that were in place to go after them. So you can see that. But it's one of those things where you look at these cartels. There's a cartel right now. We had the U.S. government had trained some Mexican law police,
Right. Federales.
Federales, and that group, after they had received our training, military type training, like trained to really go after cartels, but they get paid, peanuts compared to how much money the cartels do. As soon as they were finished training back in Mexico, the cartels said, "Hey, come work for us. We're going to pay you this much money." And then that group actually became their own cartel because they're like, "Who can mess with us? We have better training than anyone here in the country." And that's the problem that you have to see. And one of the things I think some of these counterterrorism laws can do is go after the money, right? Because if I have all this money, how can we compete? The Mexican government doesn't have as much money as these cartels have. And I can remember Guzman, right? He was the leader of the Sinaloa cartel that we finally brought to the United States. One of the kids that I helped train in the gang world went to the gang squad, and he made the best case against him because you had several DEA cases where he had been indicted, a couple FBI cases. The last case that was made against him that enabled us to finally catch him and get him was a case made by this young agent that I had trained. He, as I said, he did this undercover case, but the source when they went in, like the guy was in Mexico in a town and everyone knew he was there. Like the Mexican government knew he was there. The Mexican army was protecting the town for him to operate out of. Right. So, I mean, when the Mexican government is protecting these cartels and now you designate them as a terrorist organization, it gives us the ability to say, hey, Mexico, hey, whatever country, we still have this war against the terrorists. You sold those places. We're going to come and do it with or without you. We're not going to let 100,000 Americans die a year to the poison that they're bringing across the border. Right. And don't get me wrong. I mean, you know, we're not going to, you need education. You need a lot of things to, you know, it's not just all law enforcement arrests to get out of everything. There's more things. I mean, I've always said when it comes to gangs, yes, we have to have that law enforcement task force approach to target gangs to remove them. Same thing with drug dealers and everything. But if we can prevent at-risk youth, if we can prevent people who have been arrested from coming back onto the streets and rejoining the gang, I'm all about social programs to try and do that. I mean,
we're at a different level, though, Jeff. I mean, right? I mean, these guys and gals, there's a combination, right? I mean, let's not forget that there are gang members who are also, you know, girls. I mean, they've been raining terror through Central and South America for years and years down there. And they now, over the last couple of years, you know, they've made their way up into the United States. And this is a different level. I think that folks have to have a paradigm shift in the United States. I mean, when I started police work in 1982, it was a felony to, and remember, I worked in Southern California. I was 32 miles from the Mexican border in San Ysidro. And we had checkpoints all along up into, you know, San Clemente, out east off the 15, you know, San Ysidro, et cetera. Okay. And it was a felony to come into this country illegally. Okay. Now, at the same time, we also had a pretty good guest worker program, for lack of a better term. Those who weren't committing crimes, they're just trying to, you know, get a job, provide for their family, and they would work during the day, and you would see the population of San Diego County swell. But then they'd go back home, you know, Ensenada, you know, Baja, you know, et cetera, right? TJ. And we had a great system. It was working. Everybody was happy. Okay? And to me, it's not a complicated issue. It can be fixed really easy. Fix it. It can be fixed. If you want to become a United States citizen, it's a no-brainer. You know, everybody talks about, well, we're all immigrants. And yes, we are. But my relatives came through Ellis Island.
My side of the family came through Ellis Island.
So they did it the right way, okay? And there are many, you know, who do it the right way. Every single year they put their hand up and they swear to the Constitution of the United States. The people we're talking about tonight are the worst of the worst that have changed the dynamics of criminal behavior. They're making Crips and Bloods back in the day from the Boys in the Hood look like Cub Scouts. Okay. And, you know, the problem is now it's like cancer, and it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger, because now they're gonna go from, you know, trafficking, human trafficking, fentanyl trafficking. They're going to get into extortions, kidnappings, murders.
But Chris, they were doing the extortions first.
No, I know, that's my point.
Right, and you know, you look at the human trafficking. I mean, Asian organized crime. These guys, they all do it. They bring in these young women, and it's not just young women who are adults. I mean, underage women, right? And they're trafficking them, and they're told, hey, you come to the States, you work for me for a year, and then it turns into 4 years, and as soon as they land, their passports are stolen, and they're told, right, you're here illegally, you're going to be deported right away. And so they're afraid to like try and leave because they don't know better. And a lot of them are forced drugs to keep them compliant. And
Right.
In Boston, the Asian organized crimes, they ran tons of houses of.
I want to answer this question. As an average American citizen, is there anything we can do to protect ourselves? Yes, it's called the Second Amendment. Okay, that's what our forefathers in this country built into the Constitution. It's when Yamamoto attacked in 1941, he was asked by the Emperor of Japan, should we land on the mainland of the United States? And General Yamamoto, who was in charge of the Pacific at that time for the Japanese army, said, Emperor, I would counsel against that. And when the Emperor asked the question, well, why would you do that? Why wouldn't we do that? He said, because they have something called the Second Amendment. And he said, we will fight window to window, door to door, as we go to the interior of the United States. And a lot of people don't know this, but did you know the Japanese army landed in Alaska?
The Aleutian Islands.
The Aleutian Islands. And you know that more than anybody, Jeff, being an airborne ranger. You have, served this country honorably for many, many years. And you've been there, done that, and seen this around the country. And so the facts are, and these are the facts, these are not political, trigger points or for anything. We have to get back to this idea that we are Americans, all of us. And it doesn't matter if we come from immigrant families. And here's the other part. We can all become Americans. That's the gift of the United States. Everybody can become an American, but you can't break the laws of the land and then say, well, we want, okay? It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way because what happens is you have this umbrella that takes place. And this umbrella says, well, we snuck in under a tunnel and through a tunnel to get here. Okay? And by the way, give us your money, i.e., we're going to get kicked out of a nightclub. And you have a third world solution. It's called a machete. And you take a swing at a guy because you got kicked out of a bar. Okay. Now, I don't know about you guys listening, but I'm sure all of us can be, have the same frame of mind. Doesn't matter what political affiliation we are. Is this the country you want to leave your grandchildren if we keep going down this road? Because just in the last 5 years, this new Venezuelan gang is in the United States. And now I'm going to hit something else.
Well, let me just, Chris, can I
Go
just
ahead. Yeah, please add.
Unlike MS-13, that they haven't really targeted American citizens. They've been targeting Central American communities, and some of them are U.S. citizens now. So I shouldn't say U.S. They're keeping it within their community of that community, right? TDA was much more quick to go after and start targeting American citizens, which makes them even more dangerous in my mind because MS-13 kind of had this, we'll keep it within our community of Central Americans, whether they're U.S. citizens or not, as long as they're from our country, their descendants, they'll keep it quiet, right? Because they still have that knowledge. But TDA, I mean, you look at Colorado, those weren't all Venezuelan members living in those apartment buildings. The people that they're targeting in New York are not all Venezuelans. They're Americans, right? So that makes, to me, TDA more dangerous right now because they were so much quicker. They just got here basically within the last few years, just kind of got their feet in the ground here, and they're already willing to go after Americans. Shows a different mentality. And again, I think that's due to the fact that they are exported out of their country by the president of that country, right? But I would say too, just I know we do have the Second Amendment, but I just think too, especially in certain states, you really need to understand. One, you need to practice, right? Because the last thing you want to do is like, oh, I don't know how to. I bought a gun, but I really don't know how to use it. I don't know how to carry it. I don't know how to draw it. Those are all things that you need to practice. Retain that weapon, because how many times, because you don't practice, you don't understand it, the gun can be taken away from you and then used against you. And two, learning the law, right? I mean, you if you're going to get to the point of using your weapon, that's a deadly force scenario, and you need to learn how to be able to articulate. I used deadly force to protect myself or an innocent person because at that point, I truly was in fear of my life or serious bodily harm. Right? If people don't know that, right? I mean, we've seen cases. There was a case I'm familiar with out of Massachusetts. A girl was beaten up by her boyfriend. He constantly beat her up. Huge fight had taken place. He had left the bedroom. The door was closed, and he was a good 15 feet. And she came out and stabbed him and ended up killing him. But she had just been brutally beaten, and she lost the self-defense because everyone said, by law, though, the door was closed. Where was the imminent threat? The imminent threat had already passed because he had already left, and then you chased him, right? And those are things that we don't want people, because I'm a big believer, as you said, Second Amendment, owning a gun, but not knowing the rules can get you into trouble. And
Right.
that's the last thing we want somebody getting into trouble for, like not knowing law and knowing how to defend themselves and when to defend themselves, right?
1,000%. Responsible gun ownership is the message of the day. But Yamamoto, back in 1941, before they attacked Pearl Harbor, had that conversation. What I think also we need to continue to do as a country is we need to get back to the fundamentals of who we are as a country. And, when we talk about, people sneaking into this country, let's just talk for a second about those coming from mainland China. Jeff, I know you spent a lot of time with the State Department. You've traveled to China. You actually guarded, who was it, Madeleine Albright at the time?
Yes,
And
I was her driver.
You were her driver. Okay, so we're talking about somebody in the know, and somebody who's been there, done that. And you've also worked, back and during the Clinton administration and other presidents. So let's talk about, tell everybody that one experience you guys had when you went over to China and you had one of the employees being detained.
So the Chinese government believes that whether or not you were born in China, whether or not you're you could have been born in the United States, be an American citizen, be not born here, like a full-blown citizen, but you have a Chinese descent. Chinese thinks that you're all Chinese and that you all work for China. So one of my partners in the State Department, Diplomatic Security Service, she was Chinese by descent, but American citizen. And Madeleine Albright was flying with the president on Air Force One to China. And so I flew over on a C5, an Air Force C5 with the limousine, her limousine. The Secret Service had all their limos and follow cars on the C5s. But everyone else on the protection detail flies a few days before they arrive on commercial airlines. And when she landed, they kept her for hours at the airport in their customs, trying to force her to cooperate and become a spy for China. And it got to the point where, somebody who landed with her knew what was going on and called the embassy and said, "We need help. She's detained," basically, as they force her to do that. But the Chinese, it's a known fact. They spy not only on us but on everyone. Everything they do is spy on us and spy on other people. But they have a country where we have 12,000 FBI agents, 12 to 13,000. But you go back and you look, okay, across the board with the military, other government agencies, maybe we have a total of 50,000 or so people who can work Chinese counterintelligence. But with a country with their size, they have battalions, thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people working on different things against us. Every single person, every student that comes from China on a visa to come and study in our schools are potential spies, and a lot of them are forced, right? It's not that they want to come here and go to school and spy on us. They are forced to. They may come here 2-3 years, they're almost done. They go home for their junior or senior, or their junior or sophomore year summer vacation, and then the Chinese government says, "Yeah, we've been paying for your school. When you go back, you're going to intern with this professor, do this, and steal their stuff and give it to us. Because if you don't, when you come back, we're going to throw you in jail. But if you don't, your family's going to be tossed in jail until you get us the information," right? So it's not that they plan to, but that they're forced to. They steal.
So let's talk about real fast. I don't mean to cut you off. I apologize, but I just there is ton of film of these guys and gals coming from CCP, right? At the U.S. border. They're stopping them at the U.S. border. Okay. First of all, help the audience understand, do you just leave China?
China knows where you're going. They know. They'll. I imagine that a lot of those people crossing the border right now, or that have crossed the border, were told to come. They're all military-aged men. When you have Chinese CCP police stations monitoring their citizens or anyone who's here in the States. I mean, a couple of years ago they made the arrest in New York City. But if you think that's the only undercover police station they have, we'd be crazy to think that.
And so let's bring our audience up to speed, so everybody is on the same track. If you weren't aware of it, there was in New York a Chinese Communist Party police station set up in the city that was underground for quite some time. It hadn't been picked off or anything like that. And they were monitoring the Chinese people who have defected and escaped from China in the United States. So basically, it was the CIA operation type of concept, right? And just think of the CIA going to China and setting up a law enforcement agency and seeing if any Americans are over there providing information to the Chinese Communist Party. But here in the United States, they were actually doing it. And there's probably a lot more. Would you agree, Jeff?
I would agree. And it was different because this isn't their spies. This isn't like, right, the CIA or, trying to gather intelligence, right? These were, government party members like, hey, we're going to try and get them arrested, sneak them back, or get them back to the China, taking it a step beyond what any intel agency for any other government, right? Because at the end of the day, if we remember Snowden, he came out, he stole all the things from the NSA, and he said, "Oh, I can't believe we spy on our allies, Germany, here and that," right? And of course, at the time, the Germans kind of, "Oh, I can't believe you do that," right? That's a bunch of malarkey. Every country spies against every other country, including their allies. Let's not say that. France conducts a ton of economic espionage against the United States. It's just a fact of what every country does, right? Because most countries put themselves before any other country, including their allies. It's known. But China has such a large population, they can take it and do so much more than anyone else. I mean, you go back years, I forget, it was after World War II, but if you look at one of the planes they made, they stole the blueprints, and the blueprint like had a little missing part, like just like a little hole in the airplane like this. Their plane had everything the same, including the hole, because it was like, oh, that's the plan. And it was just a plan, just accidentally had that up. The Americans never, they corrected it, but that's the plans, right? I mean, the Chinese went to DuPont and stole from DuPont the specialized paint. You look at the paint that has that reflective nature on the streets. DuPont made that paint. They stole it so that they could make the paint and never had to pay DuPont for it, or because it's easier to steal it and then produce what they've stolen. U.S. Steel back in the mid 2000s or early 2000s, they spent millions upon millions of dollars to create a lighter steel that was stronger than a normal type steel. The Chinese stole it, and now they're creating steel, and they sell it to all these other countries because we put a ban on it. So they can't sell it here in the States, but we may still have the ability to sell to buy it from Vietnam. Well, who do you think Vietnam gets it from? From China. So all that and that espionage saves China all the money it does to develop the plan or develop the technology. All they have to do is manufacture it. All that money is saved. And so U.S. Steel, trying to recoup, has to sell their steel even higher now to recoup their losses. And it's why U.S. Steel is struggling. But, it goes back to fentanyl, right? China makes the fentanyl and they sell it, and it comes to Mexico, to the cartels. It goes to Canada, and from Canada, it'll also go, because we don't see as much fentanyl crossing the border from Canada. It does, but most of it from Canada, again, because it gets shipped into British Columbia, down to Mexico, and across the border. I remember when I was working in Lawrence in 2013, you would have DEA intercepting drug cartel information, and they would say, we need this fentanyl, we need these drugs, get it to Lawrence, because Lawrence was like a huge port in Massachusetts to get the drugs out, right? And so they smuggle it under the border. They have tunnels, they have all these, they've used submarines, all these things coming, the fentanyl all coming into the States. And it's not just fentanyl, I mean, heroin, even though that's not as big, but cocaine, all that stuff comes across the border and then shipped out.
Okay, so here's where I'm going with this. We've talked a little bit about transnational organization, gangs, etc. Okay, but now we're talking about a country, and a communist country who is an absolute enemy to the United States. Their goal is to conquer the United States. That's their goal.
Their goal is the world.
The world, right? But we're their biggest nemesis. I mean, we're in the way, right? But I think in the last 15 years, 10 years actually, they have bought up hundreds and hundreds of thousands of acres of land in the United States. Now, the good part about that, just like in World War II, stroke of a pen, you own it again. That's, the Constitution says that, sorry, no deposit, no return. But what data are they collecting around and our farmland for our food supplies? Cindy, in the art of war, tongue sue. That's right. I love it.
But Chris, think about this too. It's not just they're buying this farmland and able to spy on our military bases, right? But they're putting our own farmers out of work. And who says that they have to follow FDA rules, right? They may, but they see how we raise things. They take and raise things back in China, then send it to the farm to finish off. We don't know what they did in China with how they raised pork or beef or whatever they did. Bring it to the States, do whatever, but because it's now finally there's somewhere here where it's the finished processing takes place. They stamp made in America or whatever it is. Is it how much is it, right? You can see where certain where they raise fish, right? They got the fish in the rivers, and then they have the chicken coops right above them. So all that chicken waste is going right in the water where the fish are breeding, and then they, So to me, like I always find out if I buy fish at the supermarket, like where's this fish actually from? If it's from the Far East, I'm not buying it. I'm like, oh, nope. I'm only buying fish that's, somewhere I feel much better about where it was caught, where it was raised, because I just, you have to wonder, what are the Chinese doing? OPM, the file breach. So if anyone has had a government background investigation done by the federal government, OPM, the Chinese broke into OPM in those background investigations. Think about it now. They check out everybody. They go back years. They may find out, oh, Jeff Wood smoked pot 5 times and no one knows, right? I'm just trying to, but they may find something out that I've done.
There's only 5 times.
I've never smoked pot once. When I took my polygraph for the FBI, the polygraphers looked at me like,
I'm teasing.
Are you serious? You never tried pot? I'm like, I actually never did. I've never even tried a cigarette. I never even tried smoking, right? So that's one thing I can say that was not a vice of mine. But they find out, because if you're honest, they find out different things that you've done. And not everybody's perfect, right? But they find that out and they go, oh, maybe that's something we can exploit now, because they broke in, they see that, and they go, oh, Jeff Wood did A, and nobody knows, right? And now they come approach me. Hey, we'll spill the beans. So, for example, when we do a background investigation, we may find out that somebody cheated on the wife, and like, does the wife know? No. Well, we're not going to the wife, but we have to evaluate that and say, is this something bad or not that would exclude this person from obtaining the top secret clearance? And if it's not, we let the person in, they have a top secret clearance, but the Chinese now know about that and then come to me and say, hey, Jeff, if it was me, I'm just saying, right? We're going to tell your spouse that you cheated on her. You've got to start giving me information.
Right. They use it as extortion.
Exactly. So, but they're involved in everything. The Chinese literally have hundreds of people that sit in a room, and their day all day is to cold call U.S. businesses, U.S. companies, and do that social phishing where they're trying to get something that will enable them to get into the database of that company and then steal their secrets. That's all they do. All day long.
Yeah, it was, and it's still, quite frankly, a little. It's out of control. Did Director Chris Wray within the last month before he stepped down even mentioned the threat that China has malware into all the energy, right? Our water supply, our electrical systems.
I mean, they're ready to go. Like if we were to go to an active war, just imagine the damage they could do to everything by executing their malware.
Yeah, press a switch.
Press a button, not even a switch, just hit.
Who was it? The Israeli, what was it? Sputnik? What? I forget what was the name of that virus that Iran had through their nuclear, program. The Israelis denied it, of course, but there was always suspicion that that doesn't look right. But all of a sudden, they were just getting ready to shoot off their fuselages, and all of a sudden, everything went sideways. And that was one of the scary things about TikTok. Americans weren't paying attention to TikTok. Do you realize every Chinese device that has a recording and a GPS connection to it, they are collecting that data. I'll guarantee it.
Oh, they're collecting that data. But look at our own systems like Apple, Sputniks, right? But look at Apple. We had the San Bernardino terrorists on Christmas kill all those people. We got their phones and we said, Apple, here's a search warrant. We have a judge says, yes, you have probable cause to get into that phone and see it. And they refused. Apple refused to cooperate with us and break the password and let us in. But Apple goes ahead in China to sell their iPhones in China. They make sure that there's no privacy so the Chinese government can track everything that I make. Like, let's say I go on TikTok or I go on social media and I post something. I can't spoof it and hide it. They know exactly who did what, so they can go and arrest any dissidents. But, so Apple here goes, oh, we'll protect all privacy here. Even if you have a search warrant, we won't cooperate. But we just won't install it on our phones that we sell to the Chinese, so the Chinese government can control their people.
Absolutely. And that's a great question, Miss Marvel. We're scratching our head over here too. Okay. Trust me. What's interesting is the fact that TikTok and a lot of Americans are not related or understanding this. Just think if you're in the military and you open up a TikTok channel and you're on your base and you're doing your thing, okay, well, they don't really care about you. They care about the background, what's around you, okay? And they're gathering all of that data, okay? And make no mistake about it. My father fought in World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. He was one of the chosen few in Korea in November of 1950. He was in the Trojan Reservoir. He's buried in Arlington National Cemetery as a result of his military service. My father would be rolling over in his grave. They were hitting the soldiers, the attacking enemy, the chosen Marines, and my father was a wireman in Fox Company. They were hitting the soldiers with shovels. That's how brutal the fights were. And Marines from the 1st Marine Division, 1st MARDIV, gave everything they had for us to have this conversation today in the First Amendment. And tens of thousands of soldiers like Jeff next to me, an airborne ranger, they've gave everything for us to have this conversation. And we need to wake up in this country and stop fighting with each other and realize that there are Saracens at the gate, meaning a Trojan horse. And we still have time in this country to not be Democrats or Republicans, but to be Americans. And it drives me crazy when we see our politicians out there and they can't even have a civil conversation with each other. And the Chinese and our enemies are loving it. They are loving it. And when they see that weakness, they will exploit it. To Jeff's point earlier, he's traveling, with the State Department, and they look for a vulnerability, and they held one person. One person traveling with the Secretary of State at that time.
Well, another trick that they would do to put people in compromising positions, Chris, I can remember it happened to me. You'd be in your hotel room and get a call. Oh, I want to practice my English. Can I come up and talk to you? How do you even know I was here? Who are you to know my room and to cold call a room, right? But I've seen a video. Somebody, I can't remember who it was, but they placed a hidden camera in their room, so when they left, literally within 30 minutes, in came the Chinese spies to tear the room apart. And you can see on videos, they're looking through everything. And if you bring your own phone, you bring your own laptop, if you work for any kind of company, anything, they will download everything from that computer and that phone so they can see, is there anything worthwhile that they can use either against you or just to steal. So like, let's say you work for some cool company that's really big into some kind of research. They're going to steal. If you bring your stuff and you've got anything with your phone that's attached to that company, anything to your laptop, they will know everything that they're in. They'll get in.
Yeah, and I think if we correlate that to the fact that we let this one infection come in the transnational gang groups, okay, MS-13, TDA, and then now put that on steroids with the CCP, and so the fascinating part of that, it's almost like this buildup of we'll just let them fight with each other for a little while. Look at this, they can't even handle that problem. We're good. Everybody just kind of be quiet. We're going to slip in. We're going to buy farmland. We're going to buy land around all the military installations in the United States, around where our missile silos are, all the pharma. Hey, we're just buying corn up here, and corn, more corn. Nothing to see here. Don't worry about it. And then you see some of these videos of thousands of these young middle-aged men coming into the U.S. border. And you see them if you want to see these guys, go over to JLR Investigates. Whether you like JLR or not, I give him credit. He went down to the border with, a GoPro, and he stood right there and walked right by every one of these guys that was, being detained. And they're all doing this, and, they're turning around, and they didn't speak a lick of English. Not one word. And then, they're kind of integrated into the Hispanic culture or population of people. And then you ask yourself, wait a minute. What? How did this guy, number one, how did all these like 30, 40 guys get away from the Chinese government? I mean, the last time I checked, if you try to run from the communists towards the barbed wire fence, they're going to let you have it. And by the way, they have an app where you get a social score. And the Chinese government gives you their phone with their apps. And if you don't hit your social score, you don't even get a bus ticket. They shame you if you jaywalk through the streets. They put your picture up as you're jaywalking. and everybody else can report on you through the app. So I'm just trying to figure out how these 40, 50, 60, maybe thousands of individuals got into this country unless it was intentional. And I think this is why it's so important for the Marines from Camp Pendleton. The president ordered the military to the border. And now those guys are going to wake up, and hopefully they'll be able to get some of these folks in order. Now, it was interesting in UCLA, one of the organizers of the protest there against the Jewish students at UCLA, she was a Chinese national. She organized the pro-Palestine protest. A Chinese national organized it. Do the math, folks. Do the math. It's scary. Well, it's not scary. It's just knowledge is power, and we need to empower ourselves and get it back.
The one thing I see too, Chris, is this isn't a new problem. If you really think about it, right? 1986, they before the election, they passed they did something where they granted amnesty for everyone who was here and said, okay, we'll fix it, right?
Right. That was Reagan. I was on the job.
Why have we yet to fix it? We need to vote in politicians that will actually create laws and work together. Whatever happened to good old Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan days, right? I mean, they may still talk bad about each other in front of the press because Democrats and Republicans are going to do that. But at least they communicated, compromised, and said, let's work together for the betterment of the country. I just don't see our government doing that right now. And, hopefully over the next few years, we'll actually see some common sense where people actually say, okay, let's work together. Let's make some laws and fix the problem, right? Because we've got to be able to fix the problem and keep it from happening, where we stop all the drugs flowing across the border as easily. Because we'll see some of those. Oh yeah, we just seized 100 kilos of fentanyl crossing the border here, but how much got through? Right?
Yeah.
These cartels go, that's business. We're gonna lose a shipment. That's fine, because we have so many other supply routes. If they catch one, we've got 10 more. So there's 100 keys, but we've still got 9 times 100. There's 9,000 keys that just got through, right? And so that's, we have to think about that and stop saying, oh, we're mean, right? We're not mean. Right? You go to other countries, they have stricter immigration laws than we do, and yet I don't see anyone complaining about their laws.
Well, here's the question. Try getting into China. Seriously. I mean, why is it that every other country in the world can have sovereign borders and be a sovereign nation, but for the United States, we're not allowed to do that? And it's a shame, because immigration in this country used to be an amazing thing for those who were coming here fleeing persecution, etc. But they would go through it through the right channels. And today, for me saying that, there will be people screaming at me all day long. And trust me, I'm good with that, because I have stood over dead Americans as a homicide investigator in Southern California, a lot of them who were killed by nationals from a foreign country. Okay, so I can take the heat. I'm not worried about that. That's peanuts, because quite frankly, I guarantee the people that will criticize have never done it. And so I don't worry about it. In fact, I will tell you right now, oh, well, have a good day. Okay. Nothing to see here. Like I used to, the person that you would stop and they go, why are you stopping me, officer? I pay your salary. And I used to say real clearly, give me a raise. Let me see your driver's license, registration, proof of insurance, please. Okay. And they'd go, what are you talking about? Why would I give you a raise? I said, because I'm about ready to give you a ticket. And that means I've done a good job. Registration, please. And trust me, those people that criticize, we used to get the best laughs after it was all over. You'd hand them a ticket and they say, oh, you hit your quota. And I would say, yeah, I get a toaster. It's awesome. Have a good day.
Because I can remember being in the FBI. Obviously, we don't have in Massachusetts. It's Chapter 90, right? That's the
Bye.
For driving, right? But because I work gangs, I was always on the streets with the detectives or troopers I worked with, and it's funny because you learn, which troopers, like most of the troopers I worked with, because they were with gangs, they're like, we really weren't cared about giving tickets. Like the one trooper I worked with, he goes, I never gave tickets. I looked for drugs. And I go, okay, so what would you do when you were a trooper and you had the speed gun? He goes, I got to the point where I could be within like a mile an hour without the speed gun. I just knew, but I didn't care about speeding. I looked for the person who was doing 55 in a 60, sweating their car, because there's only one reason in the dead of winter that they're sweating. It's because they got drugs in the car, and I'm going to try and find the drugs. But now and then, they still have their ticket book, and now and then, somebody would do something real stupid where they have to pull them over, and they would probably just be given warning. But if they got crap, they're like, that warning went immediately to, as you said, here's your ticket, because you just, you had to be a pain. I'm pulling you over because you were speeding. I was pulling you over because you almost caused an accident, and you did this, right? So it was funny to see that, but yeah.
Well, and this is a perfect example. I mean, they've already started. I mean, I've already having a couple of chat, jump in the chat. But what you don't understand, I'm not going to give you my acceptance. You're not important enough. Nobody's important enough when you've stood over dead bodies. The persons that are important are the dead bodies. And if you don't understand the dead bodies, okay, then stay in all the chats you want, because that gives you a sense of importance. Okay. But there's a bigger picture and there's a bigger bag of chips out there. Okay. And sometimes when you open the bag, personality types fall out and they break up. Okay. We're talking about a real dynamic that will affect you one day in your life if we don't get it under control. 1,000%. It will affect you because, if we just look at the experience level of Jeff and I, his military experience, his law enforcement experience, I started in law enforcement in 1982. Look at all the changes we've seen just in our time of being on the front lines. Okay. Just in that short period of time where it was a felony in 1982 to come into this country illegal. A felony. Think about that. And then it was, amnesty in 86 with Reagan, where he gave, I think it was a couple million people amnesty. And then it was everybody's coming. You could detain them. Okay. And in 89, they eliminated all the mental hospitals across the United States. And that means all the jails became our mental facilities. Just go to LA if you want to see what life is like. Go to Kensington, Pennsylvania. Go to Miami. Go to Dallas. Go to all these major cities, okay, and just see what happens out there. And then you add the dynamic of all of the drugs. I was there, when the cocaine cowboys were running around. I was there when a DEA agent by the name of Kiki Camarena was killed by the cartels. They tortured him. Okay. So quite frankly, in the chat, those who are dissenters who come here just to kind of stir the pot. Okay. I hope you feel better. Seriously, I mean, it's no big deal. And I'm only talking to you to, quite frankly, embarrass you because you're not bothering me. I just think it's crazy that you spend your time, that's what's important to you when your country is under attack. When we lost 100,000 Americans last year from fentanyl. Do the math on that. In 10 years, we lost 58,000 troops in Vietnam. In 1 year, we lost almost 100,000 Americans from fentanyl. Where's the war? The war is on our streets. And who has an attitude of apathy? Not me. I see it for what it is. And I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed, but I see it. What is next year going to hold? I don't know. 200,000 Americans?
Well, Chris, there's a couple things to say about that. One, Americans, we have short memories, and we also don't have patience, right? The Chinese truly are thinking decades in advance of where they will be and how they will get there to with whatever they want to do. But we're thinking for the next 2 or 3 years. I mean, look at Afghanistan, right? We went into Afghanistan after 9/11, and then we pull out, and no matter what you want to say, do we want to be there forever? However it goes. But think about it. We still have troops in Germany after World War II. We still have stuff in Japan after World War II. I look back and say, did my tour in Afghanistan, because I went over to Afghanistan with the FBI, and I worked with 10 Special Forces group in Kabul, going after Taliban, Al Qaeda bomb makers and terrorists there, right? And I look back and say, because when I was there was a terrorist attack that I responded to with the team I was assigned, and we rescued a few dozen Americans that were in the hotel that was under attack. One American was killed. We rescued a lot of other people, captured one of the terrorists, and you just think to yourself, and now you got to think about every soldier, airman, Marine, sailor who served there. Everyone. Why did we go over there if this is what happened, right? And it's all because we don't have when we do something, we got to see it through to the end. And that goes for everything, for everything. And we look at our doctors, and most of our doctors, are good, but we have bad doctors that get these kids or young adults, even older adults, addicted to opioids, right? And so once that gets too expensive or they run out, where they go, that's when you hit the street drugs and stuff, because it's a lot cheaper to buy a fake Oxycontin pill that they think is Oxy, but but even then, okay, I get my Oxy pill, it's $80, $40 depending on the size and the weight that they're paying, but then also they can go get a little bump of heroin, because that's what it leads to, right? Because once they run out of money to get their next high, it's off to the heroin, but now it's fentanyl. And a lot of it all starts from those doctors who overprescribe and aren't doing the right thing. You know, I know lots of people who worked healthcare fraud and would go after those doctors who would just overprescribe, and all these people get addicted, and all those ODs, all back to those doctors. I mean, and it's everyone. Brett Favre got addicted from the pain meds.
Yeah.
I mean, he talks about it, right? It's not something new, but you know, but again, it's, you look at all those different things and stuff, whether it's the doctors, whether it's, do we have what it takes to gut it out? And I go back, you know, both my parents, as yours, they're Vietnam vets. My mom now is 100% disabled due to her exposure to Agent Orange. My father lost his hand, and he goes, my dad will actually say, I'm glad I lost my hand in Vietnam because I was only there for 6 weeks. I didn't get exposed to Agent Orange. I have great health. Look at your mom. She has COPD. She had cancer from Agent Orange. She has these healthcare issues from Agent Orange. You know, so you know, but you go back further to World War II and the greatest generation. When World War II hit, based on everything they've been through, everyone knew we're here to the end. Something happened where we don't necessarily have that mentality now, and it's a shame that as a country we're not coming together like that. And you saw briefly after 9/11. I mean, I saw it in Boston after the Boston Marathon bombing, right? But we forget so quickly now, and we don't band together as a nation and come together as a nation and say, hey, this is what's right. The hard right, it's a reason why it's hard, because it takes time, it takes patience, it takes that let's go and get it done instead of the easy wrong. And you know, we need to get that back as a nation.
Well, it's interesting because, you know, and I agree with you 1,000%. I've always viewed my fellow man, you know, I have a philosophy. It's better to be trusted by God than to be loved by him. Because, you know, if on a, you know, a religious text, and all religion is good for the human race. I mean, if you're Buddhist, if you're Muslim, if you're Protestant, Catholic, it doesn't matter. Okay? If you have a belief system, it is a core of morality to something. Okay? It's a belief system to something that works for you. I mean, Karen and I were just in Sedona yesterday, and you know, there's crystals everywhere, and the rocks are vibrating, and people are catching it and taking it in. Roger that. Good for you. Okay. You have something that's saying, okay, I'm connected to Earth. And they take that connection as a human being and they connect to their friends and their neighbors. Okay. I think in the last 10 years, we have lost our ability to feel. Our ability to have this conversation and say, you know what, Jeff, I agree with that, or I don't even have to say I disagree with it, but I can still listen to it and I can still be your friend. And Dr. Mercado and I, you know, sometimes he just goes off into left field. And he says, sometimes I go off into left field. Okay. But you know what? We're good friends, right? You know Gary, right? Mm-hmm. How many times have you had that conversation with Gary? And man, he'll be over here and you're over here. And it's like, okay, but we still are here together. And I really do believe that social media, all of that stuff has compartmentalized us as individuals. And we think in bits and bytes now. And this younger generation, you know, the Riz generation, the one that's coming up right now, the charisma generation, hey, maybe you didn't see me, so let me take my picture. and send it to you. That generation. Okay. Now, we have 5 grandkids, Karen and I. Okay. And this idea, we're watching them. And we're watching our children who gave birth to these kids. And it's like, wow, okay. And then you look at the society that they're growing up in, right? We look at the bigger picture here, and we have to ask ourselves, can we just not have the ability to communicate one with another? You know,
Well, it's funny you say that, Chris, because right now I'm a program manager. I oversee this contract. I've got 125 employees, and I am constantly beating into everyone's head. If you don't understand an email or they have that instant messaging type thing on the computer, I said, get in a Teams meeting where we can talk. Get on the phone and talk. I said, get off the phone, texting, because it seems to me like so many people, that's how they communicate today. And I said, there's so much that you can't grasp, right? Like, as you said, we're talking right now. Maybe I say something that you don't fully understand and you can ask for clarification. But if it's in a text or an email, you may take offense to what I say because you're like, what a butt, and fire off an angry email back to me, right? Instead of just saying, Jeff, I don't understand. Can we get in a quick call? Sure, let's talk, right? I'm constantly telling them, talk. I have all these employees who are constantly getting mad at one another. And I'm like, why are you mad? Get it on the phone. Example, we have somebody goes, hey, we need to do this. And somebody said, but I'm going to be off that week. I can't do that. Kind of saying like in the email, hey, I don't want to get in trouble if I don't get this done because I'm off that week. Will I have a different deadline? And the person wasn't understanding the deadline. And next thing you know, you see, I finally get it told because I get sent an email and you can see 4 or 5 emails going back and forth where neither one is understanding. I'm like, if you got on the phone or something like we are right now, you could have said, hey, I'm worried I'm going to get in trouble. I'm not going to be here, so I won't get it done. Oh, no problem. You get it done the week after you come back, right? But no, you've spent 30 minutes. You had to get me involved. So by the time it's said and done, something that could have taken 30 seconds is taken 5 hours. All because we do too much texting, the social media, instead of what we do best is when we talk. And then after I'm done talking, you talk. And we both have our ears going listening, right? So yeah, I do think.
How many times did your parents say, you'd be at a park or you'd be at a store or wherever, and my dad used to say, I'll be right back. Go sit next to that old guy and learn something, right? And there'd be an old man sitting there, my age now, sitting there, and I'd go sit next to him. And he'd look over, and rather than me starting the conversation, he goes, how you doing, kid? Okay. Yeah, I'm supposed to learn something here, I guess, but today, in today's world, I mean, we've lost that ability. I mean, think about in the 50s, in the 60s, well, the 50s for sure. I wasn't part of that generation. Okay. I was born in 59, but I didn't grow up in the 50s. I grew up in the 60s and the 70s. But in the 50s, they used to drive to school with rifles on rifle racks. They had gun clubs in the school. Okay. Okay. What happened? What happened with America? Where did we kind of go, whoa, we got to put the blinker on. We're making a right turn here for a minute. And today, to Laura's position or thought process, she's 100 right.
She absolutely is. I mean, today,
you can't do that anymore.
But I sometimes you blame the internet, right? Because I mean, now you have NAMBLA, North American Boys Love Association, all these things that you see on the internet. I mean, I will tell you, it became scary. I mean, I did a very little but crimes against children with the internet, it's scary. And I don't know how some people did as well. I mean, people say, Jeff, how did you work gangs and violent crime for 20 years? A lot of people kind of get burned out and leave. I didn't. One thing I always said, I've seen this, and it's a shame, right? But I saw this with some of the detectives I worked with, and I really had to help get them away from that mentality, right? But Chris, you did it. You were on the street. You see the same gang kid day in and day out, same criminal day in and day out. Every time you're dealing with them, you lock them up. They're out in a year or two, unless you get them for like a big major crime, which is hard in the gang world, where you can actually lock them up for 20 plus years. So you're dealing with them all the time, and you get a little jaded, right? And so if that kid finally gets murdered, some of these detectives, like they do their job, but their heart's not quite into it, because sometimes some of them are like, I've dealt with that punk for years. If we get the murder, great, but if not, fine, right? And here's a case in point that I saw where it backfired. You had 2 Cape Verdean kids who were murdered, and at the initial investigation, the Cape Verdean families in Boston, you've got 2 families in 2 different areas, and they've been fighting since like the late 80s, early 90s. So the bullets going back and forth, the murders rates are high. So when these 2 kids were killed, the perception is, the cops worked it, but the perception is everywhere, like, well, the cops really didn't care until they realized Hernandez did it, the Patriot tight end, and then they took interest. So when they finally make the arrest and they go to trial, the jury didn't care either, because they're like, you didn't care about our community, the perception, you didn't care about our community then, because you looked at it as 2 gang kids who got killed, but now what that is being connected to Aaron Hernandez, now you're more interested, right? And so I always made sure that for me, when I dealt with it, I always wanted to arrest the gang kid. It was funny. I made a joke. We had a gang kid who was killed that I was targeting. He was killed by a rival gang. I try to still indict him just so I could say, hey, he was indictable. The U.S. Attorney's Office didn't let me indict him. But my point was, when I went and investigated his murder, because it was a gang-related murder, I looked at it and said, I'll do everything I can to still solve his homicide. Because at the end of the day, he was a criminal. I'm not necessarily crying over spilt milk, but he still had a mom. He still had family. And that family, at the end of the day, deserves just as much effort from me and you as Mr. School Teacher who was killed, right? And if more of us made sure that the public knew that we really did take a vested interest, that we're here to serve our community. Because once you may have been a criminal, but you became a victim, you still deserve the same amount of effort, right? And when the appearance is that we don't do that, it hurts our relationships, and it hurts our ability to get into things. Because I would say, at the end of the day, you look at me like, you're going to say cop. You're not going to sell crack to me. You're not going to sell fentanyl to me. I need a source in the gang who can buy drugs from the gang. I need a snake, right? Because I call it, you've got the gang. That's the snake den. A rabbit can't go into the snake den to get evidence for me to lock the snake den up. I need a snake who's going to flip and work for me to go into that snake den, because they're going to trust that snake, right? And when you show that kind of mentality, you'd be surprised at how many kids, especially gang kids, will finally turn around and start working. Because I had a gang kid that I developed a blood, and at the end, we ran him for about a year and a half before we were done our case, and we locked up again 62 Bloods and Crips, Gangster Disciples, Lion Kings. It turned into, we initially were targeting the Bloods. Before you knew it, we called the case Melting Pot, because we did the Bloods, the Crips, the Lion Kings, the Gangster Disciples, a neighborhood gang, and all their drug dealers. And we got done, and you had a city that for 6 months before our takedown there were 60 some gang related shootings. We lock everybody up. They went a whole year and a half with only 2 gang related shootings, right? And but at the end, that gang kid said to us, he goes, I was so dumb. All I ever saw was red and blue. And if you were blue, I did everything I could to take you out. Like they took me out. They tried to take me out, right? He goes, I can't imagine. I know everyone's going to call me a rat for what I've done. But at the end of the day, I know I've actually done something to better my community. And it's all because throughout the whole time, you treated me as a human being and not as a gang kid. And that's the kind of things that we need to do to help. And it's going to be, but that's going to be much harder when it comes to dealing with MS-13 and TDA, because 1, they're coming from another country, and 2, they're like, yeah, if I'm seen talking to you, I'll get killed. And how do I know you won't deport me when I'm done, right? Because like for me, I look at it and say, I want to lock you up if you're a part of my investigation where I'm targeting you. If not, if you're a gang member, yeah, I'm all for deporting you. You're not here legally. I don't want a gang member who's going to be robbing people, doing home invasions, and killing people in our country. I want them out, and I think most Americans would probably say the same thing. I'm not worried about grandma who's coming in and working as a maid in a New York City hotel, and I don't think this administration's worried about them either. It's the hardened criminals that they're trying to get out right now. But
yeah, and I think that's where we're going wrong, and that's just my personal opinion. Is where everything is viewed through the lens of a political, lens. I mean, there's no room to see, what's really happening around us, because we're looking through one particular lens. And, that's exactly what happens to, somebody asked me recently, they said, why would you, because I'm doing some work, the defense. They said, why would you work with the defense? You're over on the dark side. And I said, well, let me ask you a question. He goes, yeah, sure. Who was one of the highest profile felons in the world? He stopped and he goes, I don't know. I mean, make your point. I said, Jesus. Sometimes we forget that. He was arrested and charged and put to death. And so, there's always this idea of, well, can we get along somehow, somewhere, someplace? Can we figure it out? And I don't know if, I don't know anymore. I believe we do, because we have to have faith, and hope and charity, right? Faith that God exists and that we're going to take advantage of that relationship that we can create with him. Hope that we take advantage, that the atonement applies to in our own individual life. And then, of course, that once we figure out what our situation is, then that allows us to help our brothers and sisters in the world, whoever they are and whatever they are. Okay. But, I don't know if you and I, having this great conversation tonight, and by the way, you're going to get the last word again, Jeff, and I still didn't get to your PowerPoint, but here's the good news. I'm going to have you back. Okay. And you know me, we're going to have you back, and we're going to continue to finish this conversation, because I think we're just getting started here with some of the dynamics that are taking place even today. Okay. Even today, and when there's Buddy, by the way, everybody, he's right behind me stretching. See him stretching?
I see.
That guy, he's such a nut job. I looked at him a little while ago, and he came around the corner, and He peeks, then he goes back around the kitchen and comes around the island again. He peeks. So it's like, hey, nut job, what are you doing? Budzo, bye. He's scratching my carpet. What are you doing? Come here, come say hi to everybody. Yeah, he's on the other side. Anyway, I have hope that this country is on the, whatever track people feel that it's on, if it's a plus or a negative. But I'll tell you what, if you want to see a challenge taking place in the world, just go look at Europe. Those folks are having problems. There were 100,000 British in the UK that came out on the streets today to counter all the things they've been experiencing there. And you know what? Here's the big question. It's coming here if we're not careful. If we don't take care of, this country, as they, remember, you don't measure your success as a parent by your children. You measure your success as a parent by your grandchildren. How your children treat their children is your success, not how your children turned out, but how they take care of themselves, their other children. And Ireland is another good one right here. Thank you, Jasmine. You're right. Ireland is another good one. And, Ireland's had a lot of conflicts in so many ways, and there's so many amazing people in Europe and Ireland. I mean, it's crazy how far, we've gone. The pendulum has swung. But here's the good news. It will always swing back. It always does. I mean, and whatever that means, I've lived a couple of weekends on this earth, and every time I wake up in the morning, I thank my God for the breath of life. And, all right, Mr. Jeff, you are always an amazing guest. So as my tradition, we'll go to Hawaii after this. You get the final word. So I'm going to pull out and you can thank our audience. And by the way, everybody, would you do me a favor? Would you please pass this around? Let's make Jeff a celebrity so that when people go, hey, aren't you Jeff Wood? When he goes to the grocery store, and then they ask him, for a picture or whatever. But that said, Jeff, will you come back?
You bring me back as many times as you want. I'll have no problem talking.
Okay.
And you can see me on Investigative Discovery, and soon you should see me on True Blue, on Paramount Plus on FBI True. So,
okay. Yeah, you were one of the real deals before a lot of the misunderstanding of misinformation got out there. So, thank you so much for being here, brother. So grateful to you and your family, your sweet wife, for cutting you loose for a little bit here. So, anything you want to say before we go to Hawaii, bud?
I just want to say thank you for having me on the show. It's been a pleasure coming on board. Thank you for the audience for taking the time out of their busy day to sit down and listen to us chat about these things. Be safe. And thank you very much. I appreciate it. Have a great.
Hard working every day. I'm stressed out 24/7, babe. No timeouts. Wish we could fly away. You and I go to our favorite place. Oh yeah. Make special memories together. I'll be your company now and forever. I say we fly away. You and me go to our favorite place. Feeling the sun on my face taking away, yeah, we're taking away. Don't hesitate now, we're taking away, yeah, we're taking away. We'll never come down, we're going away, yeah, we're going away, you and me. Feeling the sun on my face in a while.